We all bleed the same. We all love the same. We are the same. And yet, we're a little different from each other, aren't we? Just a little bit. Yeah. Really different from each other. It's this paradox of, we're the same, and yet we're different. And how to move in the world and to really understand this. So for, 2-3 years now, we've had a purpose statement. We took up a new purpose statement. This is our purpose statement. We say it a lot. It's on everything, pretty much. It says our reason for being, why we come together. Would you join me in saying it again today? We are radically inclusive, spiritually progressive, transforming lives. Yes. So we want to break this down a little bit this month, because sometimes we say things, sometimes we learn things, sometimes we believe things, and as someone was saying this morning in class, it's theoretical, and all that's great. How do I put this into practice in my life? And so today, we're going to talk about that we are radically inclusive. We're radically inclusive. And the way I want to approach this as a collective and as individuals this morning, the me and the we, is radically inclusive means going beyond my comfort zone. Okay, so in order to go beyond my comfort zone and be more inclusive, I have to first admit that I actually have a comfort zone. So I have a comfort zone. Is anyone else willing to admit that they too have a comfort zone? Yeah, there's a few of us, right? And that comfort zone, it feels really good. It's a comfort zone that I want to stay in. I know it pretty well. It's taken some time to get there. It didn't just happen overnight. And I might have already grown attached to it. Just a little. And so in order to be radically inclusive, I have to be willing to go beyond this comfort zone, whatever it is, in whatever area of my life we're talking about, right? In whatever area of your life you're thinking about. We each have to be willing to go beyond it. And what I have found is, as I'm willing to go beyond this comfort zone, that's where transformation, some true transformation can take place. And what I've also discovered in working with this over the past several years is that transformation doesn't have to take a long time. It can happen quickly. It doesn't have to happen over what we in the human realm call a long time frame. It can happen very quickly. So Ernest Holmes tells us that what a person believes about God inevitably influences his or her entire experience in life. And so perhaps if I'm going to think about stretching my comfort zone, I have to start with, well, what is God to me? So we begin with the me in this, radically inclusive. And what I believe about God and how God is and how God shows up in this universe, this cosmos, those wonderful spiritual principles, what I believe about this actually does mean how I move in the world. And I believe that God is a loving, all-inclusive God. Does anyone else believe that? Okay. A few of you. So from what we believe, which is one of the tenets of our faith, our philosophy, I'm pulling out 2 points of what we believe. It's mounted over there in our fellowship hall. It's also on a lot of things we print. And there are 2 things I want to bring out. We believe in the incarnation of the Spirit in man, in human form, and that all men and women are incarnations of the one Spirit. So we're each an incarnation of this one Spirit, so that's one. And the second one is, we believe in the unity of all life. Okay? And so this is the foundation from which I'm launching today off of and bringing in. All right? So this unity and the multiplicity, because we've already said we're different. The unity and the multiplicity actually exist together without division. There's unity and there's multiplicity. That feels very paradoxical, and yet there is no separation. They exist in that together. And since I am an expression of God, as each of these expressions here are as well, I sometimes believe and I sometimes appear to be separate from God, right? Because I'm this unique expression of it. And because I'm unique, I'm different than you. In some regards, I'm very different than you. And there's the rub. Because sometimes it's hard for me to get more into a wider comfort zone as it relates to me, within me, because I'm so different than you. Within me. Ernest Holmes tells us that our job as the body of God is to seek a greater capacity for love and acceptance within ourselves, to include more of ourselves. So he's letting us know that it's actually our job to include more of me, for me, by me, as me. So when I say me, guess who I'm talking about? That me out there too, as you. Okay? So I'm to accept more of me. For I am the incarnation of life itself. I am the incarnation of spirit. And I accept a lot. In fact, I pretty much accept all things that I hold to be true of God. I am challenged sometimes to accept all things about me. So I need to be more radically inclusive of me within me. Anybody else with me? And need that too? It's so nice not to be alone. So we're all influenced by things, at least I am. But maybe perhaps you too are influenced by things outside of yourself. Things that happen, the parents, the grandparents, where you grew up, the work you do, the television you watch, the radio station you listen to. It doesn't matter. You know, I know that I'm influenced sometimes by these things outside of me within the 5 decades I've been living in. And by the way, Ernest Holmes talks about this a lot. There is this thing called race consciousness, and it dates so far back. It just dates so far back in the human linear realm of things, and I'm influenced by that too. So I want to share a little bit about me, just so you'll get not my whole life story, but just some nuggets so you'll understand. I was raised in the South, the deep South, like Tennessee. Oh, good. Although I was born in Florida after the age of 3, I was raised in Tennessee. And no matter where we come from and no matter when we came here, because of these outside things, we all have biases and prejudices. I admit it. And so I was raised in the Deep South. I was born in the mid-'60s. I know for a fact, because of the language, both my grandfathers, I don't know about my grandmothers, but I know my grandfathers exemplified a lot of the biases and prejudices in the South. I got to hear it come out of their mouth. And it was more than racial, just so you know. It was other things too. And I was growing up, I love both my grandfathers deeply and dearly. Now my parents, I don't know how, but somehow they broke the chain of how they were raised. And I can tell you that both my parents raised me and my brother to be radically inclusive. Now, there were other things around. I also grew up in the Christian faith, deep-seated Christian roots. And I loved Jesus and God, and I wanted to be a good Christian, and I did everything I could to be so. All right? And so that just tells you a little bit about me. So, what I didn't know is, just so you know, when I did call the first person ever in my life in college, because I had an inkling for the first time in my life that perhaps I might be attracted to women, I called my father, my best friend, and said, "Hey, Dad, I don't know what's going on, but I think I'm attracted to women and I don't know what to do." His response was, "Darling, I love women, why shouldn't you?" Thank you, Dad. What that did is it gave me the moment to allow myself to stretch the boundaries that I was comfortable in, because I so respected and loved this person. He's like my best friend, my parents, everything. And he said it was okay to explore this. Now, what you don't know is just 2 years prior, I had threatened to beat the out of my best friend because there were rumors that she was gay. So, that's to let you know, as we come into 2015, 3 years ago in this community, as it turned out, after being here for a year and a half and working with Dr. Petra and spending all the time and yada, 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 there came a time where I realized there was more than a working relationship with Petra. And I shared that. She said, "Me too," right? Then we had to tell the core council, and then guess what? I had to stand up here and tell you. What you don't know is at the core council meeting, as we were sharing this information with the then current core council, although I had all appearance in my own consciousness of being okay with being gay, I started shaking. I started getting very cold. I was like going literally under the table. I was afraid everybody must see me shaking. And I was like, what is going on? I mean, folks, I lived in the Bay Area. I lived in Berkeley. I heard it called Berkeley. I wasn't, because of business and all of this, I didn't know that I was not fully comfortable until that moment. That I had not fully accepted something within myself about me. And so I had 2 weeks. That was it. I had 2 weeks before I stood in front of this community. And I knew in that moment that if I did not stretch the boundary of my love and acceptance for something about me to its fullest extent, and if I did not come to that place within me consciously that I was okay about this aspect of me, because it's different than you, some of you, many of you, most of you, certainly the religious belief and my grandparents, I heard my grandfather talk about that aunt that we don't talk about. I was like, if I don't do this work and become radically inclusive about this aspect of me, as I stand here, all of that's going to be reflected back. So I had some massive transformation to do in a short period of time. And I did. With help. Sometimes I can't do this alone. I go to practitioners. I go to ministers. I need assistance in my life when it has especially to do with me. Not so much when it has to do with you sometimes, but when it has to do with me. So this thing, and it's not the only thing, but this thing, it's just like unbelievable for me that it took 49 years. Or some portion of that, right? At least 29. To be radically inclusive of me. What is within you? This is why I share this, because I know I'm not alone. What is within you? What aspect of you? It could be more than one thing. Have you not fully loved and accepted and radically become inclusive of this magnificent, incredible, divine expression of the one as you? When we realize it, sometimes we're not even consciously aware till something bumps up against us. Because I sure to heck, I can tell you, never, ever in my wildest dreams would I thunk it that I would have come fully out at 49 as a minister, as a gay woman, in a spiritual community with the other minister in Dallas, Texas. You helped me radically include myself. And because of that, I know what Holmes is saying here when he says the person who finds herself in God will discover the center of her being, something which dominates. It dominates without effort. Something which does not have to assume a false front. I no longer say, my husband. What does he do for a living? Well, he's a minister, right? I did that in the past. Whatever, right? So there is no false front. Something which, by the very nature of its being, is both human and divine. Wow. So I believe God is radically inclusive, and this includes everything about me, and it includes everything about you. Everything about you. So, is there something within you that you need to radically include and love and accept about yourself? It's never too late. So, keep that in mind so you can be with that later and ask a practitioner to help you. Because, again, I couldn't do it alone. So that you can drop the false front. It's time to drop them. Okay, so now let's move, shall we, from the me to the we. Take a breath. Whew. Ernest Holmes says, our religious outlook, you can say spiritual if you want, but this is his quote. Our religious outlook is a universal one. There is tolerance in its concept and inclusion. The infinite is all-inclusive and all-embracing. It makes sense. If there's only God, God can't exclude anything about itself. It can't not embrace anything about itself. It's all-inclusive and it's all-embracing. So I'll go back to what we believe. We believe in the incarnation of the Spirit in man, and that all men in incarnations are of the one Spirit. We believe in the unity of all life. So there is one Spirit incarnated in everyone. And what difference do you think it would make in our human relations if we all came from that perspective? Woo. This viewpoint of the truth that we are all bound, we are all connected in the unity of God. And so this idea again comes up of there is unity and multiplicity, and it exists together. It cannot be separated. So let's talk about the multiplicity of God. There is so much multiplicity of God. Can you shout out, this is participation time, can you shout out some of the ways that God shows up in this multiplicity? Differences. Go ahead. Creativity. Wildlife. Nature. Planets. Children. Religions. Love. Wait. Race. Trees. Language. Personality. Disabilities or abilities. Yes. Wisdom. Colors. Culture. Masculine and feminine. Music. Different religions. We can go on and on, right? Deaf people. Not that Willie's deaf, but she's doing this, right? Thinking styles. Skills. Introvert, extrovert. We could go on and on, right? This multiplicity in the unity of God. Okay, so, and again, because of where we each come from, through all of these, there are biases and prejudices. There are. Race consciousness has dripped on us and dripped on us and dripped on us until we believe something. You know, the drip keeps going until there's a pool of something, and now I believe that, consciously or unconsciously. So I want to share, again, I'm putting myself out here again, and I want to share a moment in time. So I was raised, like I said, although in the South, my parents, and how I thought was inclusive. Can't say that for most of my friends. They didn't understand why I wanted to go to Memphis to college. Just a lot of stuff. But, you know, I really am proud that I'm like an inclusive person. Well, several years ago, while I was in ministerial school to boot, there was this Season for Peace and Nonviolence gathering in Oakland, California. And a lot of people from all kinds of cultures, races, religions, everything, ages, abilities, came out to this park. It was a beautiful afternoon. We had Native Americans doing all kinds of things and all kinds of music, and it lasted for hours. Great food, all of it. And it was so rich, and it was all about peace. And I was right in the midst of that, and I was like, oh, this is so good. I'm like filled up, and I just feel like there's hope for humanity, and we're all one. Oh my gosh. And I got in my car, and I had to drive through one of those, neighborhood streets to get you to the main street to take me home. And because I was in a park I normally didn't visit in Oakland, and I went down this street, and it was a black neighborhood. And there were 4 black men on the sidewalks, just out there hanging out and talking. And within instant, my body went into fear. My body was like, no, fight or flight. And I was like, ooh, it's only 25 miles per hour. How fast can I move down this street? And I became conscious of this. And I was like, oh my gosh. And when I got through that street, out of the neighborhood, and got on the main street, I literally pulled over and wept. I was like, who am I? What is this about? How did this come up? This is not who I am. This is not who I live. This is not who I claim to be. And it was there. It's called race consciousness. Been dripping and dripping and dripping. And I became aware of it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So in that moment, I made a conscious decision. I'm like, this must be eradicated from within me. It must. So that this is not a response, even unconsciously. Because I had somehow, somewhere, bought into a false belief that black men are dangerous. And I wasn't proud of that. And so I started doing my work on that and working within my own consciousness. Months go by. Now, one of the things that I am now vigilant on for the sake of my own life, so that I will allow myself to stretch out of my comfort zone, because this is actually the one way that I am stretched the most, is I listen to my spirit voice within. It's taken decades for me to know the spirit voice. It's taken me a while to acknowledge the spirit voice. And it's taken me even longer to follow the spirit voice. Okay? But there's reasons why, and it's saved my life a few times. But what I now do with my spirit voice when it comes up is I unwaver on following it. I have to be willing. Whatever the spirit voice says, I must be willing to follow it, and I do. And so I say that. I can tell you that whenever I have, it not only stretches my comfort zone, but something mystical, miraculous, magical, and undeniable occurs. And I'm always safe. So I want y'all to know that in advance. So months from doing this work, it was a Friday night. I was coming from the center in Oakland. It was late at night, and I come off the highway, and I lived in Oakland, up in the hills of Oakland, and so I would take this hill drive up, and it was like any other night. I was happy, and I was, the richness of the class that I was in, I was taking, and all of that. Y'all know what that's like because you're in classes.
And so I was like on this high. And I pulled off the highway, and I started up the hill, and somewhere in the peripheral vision, I probably saw a person walking on the side of the road. And I just kept driving, and the spirit voice within said, "Back up now." And I had to be fully willing to do that under whatever conditions would show up for me. And I followed Spirit's voice. And I backed my car up, rolling down my window before I got there. I got beside the person that was walking on the side of the street, and it was a black man. And I said, "Hey, would you like a lift?" And he looked pretty stunned at me. He said, "Why, sure. I live up there." And I went, "Well, come on, hop in, let's go." He got in my car, I introduced myself, I found out his name, we had a conversation, but the first question, after we shared each other's name that he asked me, he said, the question was, never forget it, he said, "What kind of God do you believe in and have a relationship with?" And I said, "Well, I believe in an all-loving God, an all-inclusive God, that we're all one. There's only one thing happening here, and I go to Oakland Center for Spiritual Living. You ought to check it out." And we went further up the hill than maybe I'd anticipated, but, he said, "That's me," dropped me off. He said, "You know what? The bus has been leaving me down here, and I've been walking up the same path for over 16 years. And not one person had ever stopped for me. Not one." When he got out of my car, just like the previous time, I pulled over and I cried. But for a different reason this time. I cried because from the moment the Spirit within me said, "Back up," until I let him out, not one cell in my body was fearful. Not one. And it has not been since. And I share that because I had to be aware of something within me that wasn't as inclusive, that had bought into a false belief. Nothing had ever happened to me in my life, and even if it had, one bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch, babe. We could do that about every single thing in humanity. And so, and then it occurred to me that, wow, and how many opportunities had I missed before then to say, "Good afternoon, how you doing? How long have you been a waiter here?" Whatever it is. "Hey, you want a hug?" Whatever it is. That was an example because he hadn't had one expression of the individualized body of God in 16 years to say, "You want a lift?" And I've passed up so many opportunities of all these diverse expressions to include in my life. And I was grateful that I got to have that mystical experience of that one. And so we talked about this. We talked about all of the various forms, right? We just shouted them out. I would like for you now to think about, look at all the people that are in your life, and look at all of, when you think of your workplace, you think of your family, you think of your neighbors, you think of the restaurants you favor and go there frequently. If you're like me, I go to the same ones a lot, et cetera, et cetera. And think of all the things that we put out there, okay? The way we think, Some people are introvert, extroverts, different cultures, different religions, different ages, different physical abilities, right? There's this whole plethora. Think of, for you, where are those for you? And would you be willing to come out of your comfort zone and to push yourself to get to know someone that might be out of your comfort zone? Question. What do you see in this sanctuary? Look around. Look around. As best you can, look around. How many of those do we see here? Just sort of gather them for yourself. How many do we see here in this community, in our spiritual community? We have a purpose statement that we're radically inclusive. So are there 10 to 15 kinds of people in the community? I don't know, look around. Have you thought of people that aren't like you? Have you invited people here that aren't like you? Have you stretched yourself a little and come out of the comfort zone in all the things you actually already do in your life and include them? So this is the homework I'd love to give to you, to think about being willing to do, to come out of our comfort zone a little bit. And that is, we can begin here in the community, if you'd like. Might feel a little like at ease because you've seen people around here. Then it can expand into work, et cetera, et cetera. So things like, how many people already go out to eat? How many people already go out to eat? Okay. What if we each started including someone that we might not generally ask to go to lunch or dinner? How many people go to movies? How many people have a barbecue? How many people go swimming? How many people have Thanksgiving? You know, whatever. You see what I'm at? To be radically inclusive, I have to be willing to have the intent that I want to include you. Push yourself to get to know the faces of God. I end with Ernest Holmes because he says this is one of the supreme tests of our spiritual conviction, that we desire, and we permit radical inclusiveness. And so we're cultivating the consciousness of growth. We're cultivating the consciousness of radically inclusive. Just yesterday in a conversation with Reverend Deborah Johnson, she said, I cannot tell you. She's been here twice. She's been in this a long time. She's traveled all over the world. I gave you her bio last week. She said, I cannot tell you how amazing it is to see the intention of this community. This community has set the bar high, she said, in all religions. And we can still grow a little more out of our comfort zone. So I honor us, and I know that we are willing to grow a little more because something is calling us a little bit deeper. A little bit deeper to include the whole body of God.